Hi everybody. Today I thought I would do a review on a book called Zulu Shaman. It's a book written by Credo Mutwa. It says Zulu Shaman, Dreams, Prophecies and Mysteries, and it was written by Vusama Zulu, Credo Mutwa, and edited by Stephen Larson and forward by Louisa Tesh. And the reason I'm bringing this book up is specifically to do with the information that is pertaining to the Trapezoid, the order of the Trapezoid, which is from the previous video that I've discussed, which seems to have created a lot of waves in the ethers, as well as the worship of the diamond or the diamond shape, which is the one-dimensional trapezoid. And I'll show you in the image here. There you go. You're looking at that, which is the reference to the goddess. In this book, it's referenced as the goddess. Then there's that symbol as well. I think that pretty much explains it all, that this is part of the skin of the Taurus. And then there's that as well. I'll bring more information onto this as soon as I'm able to explain to you much more clearer where I'm going with this. I've written it all down on paper here, so I'm looking at my notes. Okay, and then I also want to bring up this book, which is sadly a disappointment, because this book relates to all the amazing traditional events that and experiences within this man's life and the people that he's touched. However, sadly, it's predominantly political, as well as just as much as this other book is. And it looks very much like a carbon copy of Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods and Return to the Stars, almost verbatimly, which is really disappointing. So, okay, so the reason I'm bringing up this material is to, again, open up and show you the fact that the material that is used in this book is coming from the Kabbalah, as well as a fusion of Sophia, the Gnosticism as the mother goddess, which anthropologically I suppose you could fuse it if you look at it. There's no other continent that does not seem to not have that sort of belief system in some way, shape or form, although I don't think it is exactly, let me put it there. So I'm bringing this up because it concerns me that the entire spiritual information that is explained in his works has been used for political, motivational purposes to keep certain things going in a specific way. This is not just because of South Africa, this is just all over the world. Spiritual people, their abilities are used to create a certain frequency that holds a particular situation in a particular way. Okay, and he mentions it a lot in this book, where he talks about magic being used. Even the person that writes the foreword talks about it specifically in that way, that is the agenda. It's the agenda to use a man's magical gifts or his spirituality for a specific purpose. There's nothing else that they seem to be. Healing comes up, but very rarely. No one really seems to bring up a lot of the healing in this book. I was looking all over for it, to be honest with you. Okay, so this is not, let me just give you a disclaimer here. This is not about the author. This is not attacking the author. An analysis on the work is not ever attacking an author or what they present. It is about what the information is that is relayed in such a way that relates to the thing that we're discussing, which is the trapezoid. This is the one-dimensional image of the trapezoid, and it is referred to as a goddess, which means that is just yet another worshipping element in the system, in the Taurus. It is the same as the previous video to do with the Temple of Set and the runes. It's exactly the same thing, We're just addressing the same thing in this book. Okay, it is just explained in a different way because you have to literally step around all of the political, cultural dramas and stuff. And I do not do politics on my channel. I talk about the magical thinking and things in a metaphysical manner. Okay. Okay, so the foreword. So the book was published in 1996, and it was originally titled "Song of the Stars," and I think it was then changed to this Zulu Shaman, and edited by Stephen Larson, like I said, and it was catalogued. All of his work was catalogued, oddly enough, in the Library of Congress in America. And magical thinking, even if it's rooted into the skin of the Taurus, is called root magic. I'm calling it that because it is inverted. It is inverted magical or lower vibrational magic that is done continuously to alter the material realm around you at all times. So in other words, people changing weather, people changing certain things that make certain things happen, certain movements that take place, people moving in a particular way, etc., etc., etc. I'll explain a little bit more in depth. Just be mindful that I do have to bring it back to your attention that the Nazis was very interested in the occult, and they literally went to from country to country to country and literally destroyed or claimed or controlled or placed things in or artifacts in certain countries' religious centers to control the energy in that center. The same thing applies to this particular work in here as well. Okay, so the calamity of the continent can be explained, if you look very carefully, by the amount of magical power that's used to keep a certain country or continent in a particular frequency. I keep saying to you that spirituality and magical thinking is the controlling aspect to everything that is physical in this realm. Okay? Therefore, I am not surprised that there is this symbol for the belief. These symbols are all related to the frequency that comes through the trapezoid or the tile of the Taurus. Okay, the skin of the Taurus. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you're brand new here, go to the last video that I've made called Beyond Thunderdome, and you will understand why I'm saying what I'm saying. Okay. So now, I'll look at the first page for you, so that I can explain to you what I've just done. Some analysis points here. Like I said, I didn't do anything more on this because it's extremely loaded with politics. Sadly, actually, very sad that it's done in that way, and very sadly that it's related to Eric von Daniken's material. This is obviously before David Icke came around and recaptured the same information and gave his spin to it as well, because David Icke is a thief, synonymously for that. And who's to say that whatever Daniken had written was also not theft from anybody else, because this is what these people seem to do. So it's written here that there is let me just find this to you. Let me find this for you. Okay, so there's a reference to the material as by the author as that there's a focus on seeking wholeness through the intentions of healing. Okay, that I think is what he wanted to do. He was focused on that, and I actually think he tried to bring it across, but I don't think it was respected as it should have been. But that's my opinion. I keep getting the feeling that they didn't want him to people just didn't want him to do the good things. Like they didn't want him to bring good things in. They wanted him to do things the way that they wanted him to do things. So this is why I keep feeling that this man was trapped in some weird way, even though he may not have realized it himself. Okay. I don't think he'll ever admit it though. Maybe he will. Maybe he did. He's passed away for a long time now. Okay, so there's a reference to Mutwa's work as a lore. And Mutwa's lore was related to West African folklore, Caribbean or African American. This is now this Louisa that wrote this. Louisa also wrote in explanation that as I look at the folklore, because this is my love, there is so much in Mutwa's lore that is related to what I know of West African folklore and much of what I know of Caribbean and African American folklore. Then she writes, the tree of life and the great mother. Here we have ugliness and beautiful gods and goddesses. The wonders and terrors of their lives light up in the sky. So that is a reference to the, obviously, the pagan beliefs, all right? Not that I actually need to even tell you that, because I think you know already. So here, and the next part is also here very interesting, and I'm reading out of the book for you. Here we have tricksters Kintu, very much resembling Alegba and Anazi and Eyoba, and all of the other tricksters that one finds in African folklore. Some of the names Odu or Noma. Now Odu sounds like Odin actually, and Nomo sounds like it came from the Chariots of the Gods. Okay, so there's a lot of deities and a lot of gods and goddesses. I mean, there's pretty much a goddess for a deity for everything else. Again, it references to the belief of everything that is outside of the person and not ever anything inside, which is the issue that is a problem, generally speaking. And there's a reference that is strongly denoting Gnosticism, where it refers to the feminine face of God, with the lustful tree of life and the raw evil worming, end quote, which is a reference to the demiurge. And that information, Gnosticism, is much older than this information in this book. He himself said that after he had written these books, that's what his intention was, to reformulate the traditions for specifically this purpose. Okay, so it's new. Okay. Then it's also said here that there's a strong drive to want to complement Mandela's political journey with Mutwa's mythology, and putting the two together gives us a more whole, complete picture of South Africa, which is incorrect. The secular, political, and the magical, mythological with the situation. This is a problem with everyone that is focused on them internally as a spirited being, are noticing that there is a strong drive to magically transform certain things in the realm, which is based on politics via magical influence. I always had the sense that it was always there, I think, in the civilization of humanity, in the umpteenth version, of course. Section here, here's a picture of Credo Mutwa. So Credo Mutwa was found, or the person that wrote the foreword found Credo Mutwa in a place called, at the 1985 International Transpersonal Association in Kyoto, Japan. I don't know, it doesn't say how he got there or and why he got there, but it just said that that's where he was met by the person that did the introduction, and said that he was very charming and very kind, and around him were a lot of people such as Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, William Irwin Thompson was there, and many others that were interested in his information that he was sharing at the time. Okay. And he was very colorful and very respectful as to how he was explaining about where he came from and what he was investigating. And the most interesting thing that I found that he mentioned was that there's a similarity or a commonality between Japanese and Zulu, which is the traditional name for the information that he or the people, and that it was and that he had a collective vision that he would have hoped that would require a lot of evolution or growth for a planetary family to happen. Okay, now we know what planetary family could mean, and not just only Little House on the Prairie family, but also the Mafia family, which could also be that family. So I suppose it depends on the people of the family, because a family would normally respect one another individually for who they are. Okay. Then he references something here very interesting about the origins or the title of the Sangoma, which I want to read to you. Okay, and he writes here, Sangoma, or a shaman or a healer, and High Sanusi is clairvoyant and a lawmaster, a word he believed to be related to the Indo-European language matrix, to the Sanskrit Samyasan, which means holy, wanderer, wandering mendicant, or like the yogi, he claimed the Sanusi was an uplifter of his people, one who had foot in the yonder realm and could act as a conduit for spiritual realities. Sanusis or Sangomas are sometimes pejoratively called witch doctors, but this is misleading. Neither of these roles involves sorcery or the wielding of magic to attain ordinary human objectives. I want to disagree there a little bit there, because I've heard of things that are not exactly like that kosher. Okay, then that's just me saying that. Okay. Then the Sanusi, he told us, is a person who strives ceaselessly to be ethical in everything he does, for the fate of the tribe or nation may depend upon his discernment. He is accountable both to the natural and the supernatural realms, and ultimately to the entire pattern of the universe. That is impossible to be in control of the entire pattern of the universe, since the universe doesn't exactly exist. So, but that's just my opinion, and based on what we found. Then he also refers to the Japanese person who actually asked him about aliens, UFOs, and he said, well, do you think just because you live in Japan that you can see UFOs, that we don't see anything there? Which I thought was funny, because there seems to be this belief system that if you live in South Africa that you have a flat head, you have absolutely zero interest or intellect at all, or that you actually know what you're looking at or talk about. Okay. Then he refers to them as the fiery visitors as well, and he calls them Abahambi Abavuteu. I think that's how you pronounce it. Okay, my Zulu is a bit rusty. So they figure in our mythologies and origins. So they feature these things, these fiery visitors feature in mythologies, which we all know that they do. It's just in the way that it was presented that concerns me, when it is presented in such a way. Just too similar to what Eric von Daniken has spoken about. And even if this was copied from Eric von Daniken, my concern is, why is it so similar? Okay, it's not because it's because it's fantastical that it's discovered, and not everything that is discovered internally has to relate to be the same as anything else. I find it curious. My concerns are curious on that, but that is my personal opinion. Okay, and if you have a different opinion, then please feel free to have your personal opinion. I'm doing the review on the book, on the material itself. Then there's a very strong overlay also from the Dogon mythologies as well. So that is another that is another thing that seems to be coming up here as well. A very strong Dogon mythos. Okay, and then he also explains something very interesting here, where he talks about the story from the Sangoma, which is very interesting. So he writes here, Credo Mutwa's lore is explored from the story of how he became a Sangoma to the Sangoma's lore of the human soul and how healing is conceived by Sangomas and Inyangas. Okay, another category of shaman. We move to a sampling of his vast knowledge of African folklore. First thought of creation myth with a focus on those of the goddesses to stories of the scurrilous trickster Kintu, which I've just mentioned, his outwitting of cannibal giants, etc., etc., and then interlaced with worldwide mythological and Zulu mythology. So there's a interlace or a mixed up with Zulu mythology as well as worldwide mythology and the lore of the stars. Credo Mutwa's also experienced a lot of alien, like I said, alien experiences, because he calls them his close encounters. We had some terrible experiences as well. Then again, who doesn't these days? I mean, that's just quite part of the course if you're aware of things spiritually. Then he also talks about the following here, which is, okay, and then they say that he's a national treasure with his information, his wisdom. And he had a lot of wisdom on a lot of things, but most of the stuff was all based on stories that he spoke, which, I don't know, it's just something. Okay, so Credo Mutwa was eager to reach receptive minds and hearts in America, so he focused a lot on that. That was his intention. Then there's also there's this commentary from Joseph Campbell as well. I think it's what he said. Living mythology has been described by Joseph Campbell as inexhaustible source of wisdom for those able to open themselves to its instructive wonder. And that's the Joseph Campbell. And years after having studied with Campbell, my appreciation has deepened for his approach, says Credo Mutwa. Okay, so this is why I keep saying to you, you need to really think deeply on what you're actually looking at. We know that Joseph Campbell's work is based on a lot of anthropological discoveries on many other tribal information. And yet there was a study, yet he studied with Joseph Campbell, or he studied alongside his work, or he studied his work. So what does that tell you? I mean, at some point, some material does go into the subconscious and then starts to become some sort of belief system for things to become a mythology. When do things become a mythology? I mean, you need to question these things, is what I'm saying. Okay, so then it's also added to Credo Mutwa's stories, as he say, that he wanted to protect his stories. The question is, really, are they really his stories though? Are they really the stories that he's picked up from his people, or are they stories that have been influencing his consciousness? This is why I keep saying, you need to understand when you do a type of research into material, you'll understand. The more you dig into it, that you'll see that there are small anomalies and things that don't make sense. It's also mentioned here, he's calling his work perennial philosophy. Okay, perennial philosophy is a religious term for information. So if you tell stories, allegories, and you make it into a religion, then that is a problem. I mean, it is a problem. Much like what I think is actually based on the entire Bible book. So, okay, Then, okay, here's the biography of the making of Credo Mutwa. It's very, they say in the book that they've written it in such a way that they try to write, they keep to what he wrote. So if there's a lot of duplicates, it's because the person that translated the book made the duplicates based on the information that he wrote from Credo Mutwa's book. Okay? So this is his biography written in here, and then they've translated it as well. Credo Mutwa was born in 1921, July 21st, in Natal, South Africa. So that gives you an idea of how old he was back in the day. Mutwa's father was a Roman Catholic, and he was converted to Christian Science of Mary Baker Eddy in 1935 and remained loyal to the religion until his death. Therefore, as Mutwa remembered, it was that if we were sick, it was hard for any one of us to get medicine. So I'm busy reading from the book. Okay, I'm reading the parts of the book. Then he says that's why he felt he needed to investigate his natural abilities to create natural medicine, plant medicine, which is basically the only time there's anything mentioned about healing in this book, which I find sad. Because I actually thought that that's what was in here. That's why I got the book. Okay, so then he was educated in mission schools and he was taught in English. His father wanted him to become very well versed in English, and that he wanted him to become a school teacher. So that was something that Credo Mutwa actually wanted to do, was to become a teacher. And then in 1943 he suddenly became very sick. So he writes here that the sickness was an experience that often comes to future Sangomas initiating their calling. Okay, this particular sickness is also called is a process where he writes, quote, "An Inyanga may inherit the profession from relatives. It's as a kind of traditional healer, all right? But a Sangoma may receive a call from the spirit, which seems to be happening to him." Okay, so he felt he was being called by the spirits, and that is why he became ill. And Mutwa would then undergo a type of purification of ceremonies and renouncing formal religious or beliefs of Christianity, so that he was able to focus more on the message that was coming to him. Okay, and then the illness that he experienced was called ukutwaza, which is based on his recollection, where he had visions of himself going through all kinds of weird stuff. He was torn to pieces. He writes here quite very detailed, where he said he was actually seeing doctors and stuff, and nothing could be done for him. He was feeling odd in himself. I actually think he had a near-death experience, if you ask me, because it's quite severe. And he must have had a few of those, because normally when you have those near-death experiences, when you're like just half in, half out, you tend to break a lot of things that come in, that are inside of your consciousness that are false. Or you discover that they become false, that they are not even real, so they break. This is why you keep going back and forth, in and out. And I think this is what he went through. It's quite a severe time. He also then writes where he even saw himself going through a wall that his dog was going through as well. So that was part of that. Then he writes here, then it's also mentioned here that the apprentice Sangoma then is one who has been touched by this illness, ukutwaza. Hence, he or she during this training period is called a twaza, Twasa, twaza, as Dr. Stanley Krippner has elucidated in his role, and must learn now how to prepare herbal medicines, and then how to interpret dreams, how to incorporate spirits, how to diagnose illness, how to exorcise tokoloshi, which is another word for golem or zombie, actually. frightened ghosts or zombies, how to control weather, as you are hearing what I'm saying, how to foretell the future. In addition, the Twaza must learn the tribal and community history, mythologies, and ceremonies. Alright. And because much of their time is spent counteracting the Tagati or hexes placed upon tribal members by witches, Sangomas are often called witch doctors, which they seem to have contradiction every time there's an explanation about a witch doctor. They say that they don't do Tagati, although I can tell you that there is no person who does not do that if their agendas are negative. Okay, so it doesn't matter what you call yourself, you still commit the negative, malevolent crime on a spiritual level to harm another person. It doesn't matter what you are called. Okay, so that is the difference. Then he explains here that there's a misunderstanding of witch doctor, and then it's defined by Credo Mutwa as not a person who specializes in throwing hexes, but rather the opposite, but he never really explains what. So I'm just telling you, think ahead. I think he's afraid of actually explaining what exactly that they do, and that they actually do that. Alright? So then he explains here, Sangomas must understand and to some extent control the same occult forces as does the sorcerer, if he or is to be effective in curing a person from the magical constructed spells that have been cast. These are usually initiated by a sorcerer at the request of an enemy or even a hostile or alienated family member, or ... I'm adding politician, religious fanatic, criminal gangs, ... I've just added that part in because that's what happens these days. It's not related to here, it is all over the realm, this kind of shit. But the Sangoma's sphere of concern is far more broad and deeper than that of a sorcerer. Okay, so his or her understanding of magic must be comprehended in its context, its history, and its mythological antecedents. And there's a level far beyond that of the magical technology or magic who simply activates its force. Okay, so in essence, the Sangoma must embrace the whole inner sense of both the natural and the supernatural worlds as a preliminary to entering into the zone of the magical cause and effect. Where have you heard this? In the last video that I made about the Temple of Set. Exactly the same capacity, the same principles, the same magical aspects. Power is not believed to reside in a single act or ritual of magical efficacy, but in the entire universe. All right, the objective universe. Go back to the last video and you'll understand. And it is only through knowledge of an orientation within the universe that the Sangoma's power may be exercised in a wholesome way, one that heals both the person and his immediate reality or his world at the same time, relieving the magical exchange of the reflective overcompensation of cause and effect. I mean, that just says it all, doesn't it? However, it's not always used for that. That's my concern. Or there would not be a discussion about this. So then he says in the next information here, he says, I am positive in the same kind of thing that you get imbued with a crazy feeling that if you could be sacrificed on some altar, things would come right for the world. So he believes in self-sacrifice, which I think is not the right thing to do, which I actually think comes from Christianity belief, where Jesus is used as the martyr to sacrifice the self for others to live. That is not the way to do that. You do not do that, because then you key into the hero program, which comes from Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. So keep that in mind. Then he says, Credo Mutwa was a very successful Sangoma and then eventually elevated to the rank of High Sanusi. like the Indian Samyasan, a holy man who has taken vows, and he was, in a way, a leader over 500 traditional healers at that time. Okay, so Credo Mutwa believed very much that he was contributing to the traditional changes, or the tradition, to put it that way. He wrote something interesting here about the keepers of traditional stories called guardians of the Umlandu, which is tribal history. It's different but overlapping role with that of the Sangoma. Okay, so now this is where the problem started sneaking in, because I know that the guardians of Umlandu, their material, the tribal history, is based on the tribal history of the of the tribe itself, based on only the immediate environment and everything else around that, not overlapping with other weird sort of stuff that comes in from other people and spicing it up. That's the concern, okay? That if you deviate from something like that, then you could probably set yourself up for trouble, which he experienced a lot of, because there were a lot of people that are actually fighting him on this. There was a lot of upheaval as well, and he was also ostracized at some point. Right, so then there's a section here called Politics and Social Realities, which was very much influenced by this book, like I explained. This one, which is filled with Eric von Daniken's space stories and gods and goddesses stuff, and allegories that are written in such a way that is very aggressively based on, revenge and so on and so forth. Yeah, some are actually quite lovely stories and others are actually quite bad, with due respect. Okay, so then this book, Indaba My Children, which was written in 1964, that it relates or correlates the same time as when Chariots of the Gods came out as well, by Eric von Daniken. There's a reason why I'm bringing him up, because of the stuff that he wrote in the book, and I happened to read Eric von Daniken's books at the time when I was a child. So there were information in there that sounded, that looked the same, words described the same scenes, and I thought, why is this so familiar? It's just, if you can tell a story correctly, the way that they tell the story, yeah, it's mentioned here, like it was done in the 60s and the 76. That's when all this material came out. So, okay, so that's basically the issue, all right? And there is also another section, and this is in Wikipedia, the link will be described, put at the bottom, that there's plagiarism controversies as well with another guy called Robert Charu, who also he accused Eric von Daniken of stealing his ideas. So, as you can see, there's a lot of stealing taking place. Okay, so now, let me go to the next page. Yeah, like I write here, heavily influenced by politics, and that is not the focus of this channel at all, so I do not go into the politics of the whole thing. Mutwa has always spoken out against violence, and his fiancée was killed during the Soweto demonstrations, which was very sad in how it was done, based on him being so specifically outspoken about certain things, which is quite sad. Mutwa himself was attacked by activists as well as traditionalists out of keeping with revolutionary principles on his right arm and hand slashed with an axe, which is quite bad. We'll move on from there. And here's an image of Credo Mutwa with Sangoma women, healers, traditional healers, as you can see. Alright, and the next page, The Way of the Witch Doctor, which is his biography, his essay on himself. There he is again. Okay. And he talks about the illness, but this is a very interesting quote that he wrote here. which I want to read to you. He says, you get imbued with the crazy feeling that if you could be sacrificed on some altar, things would come right with the world. My becoming a Sangoma was but the first step on a long journey, which eventually led me to many parts of Africa, a journey to searching for the great truth, a journey of being healed by great healers than I, of many ailments, and also eventually of healing others of my people, who I myself became a fully fledged healer. And that was actually who he was, a healer who wanted to heal people. He was a kind man, but there was a lot of influencers trying to take his work and change it in narratives that suited the socio-engineering of the material reality. Okay, that is actually the condition that is the condition that happens to many. So from here onward is all political, which I've gone through. Here and there's a few things talk about the little stories that he wrote about his experiences finding the tricksters and so on. But most of these gods and goddesses and things do come from the Chariots of the Gods and the Return to the Stars as well, by Eric von Daniken, which I'm looking at right now. So it would be good if you do this research yourself. You'll see what I'm talking about. There's also images in there, the petroglyphs, that are related to the same sort of influence as well, the ancient astronomers, ancient astronauts thing as well. So in the notes at the back, which I found very, very interesting to share with you just before I go to that book, and I'm busy wrapping up, is that I wanted to read to you something here very interesting. So Mutwa does not use the theosophical term aura, but he uses the word light. He uses the word light to reference his soul's radiation, or the frequency of the soul that radiates outward is light, which is correct, which is what we know in metaphysics to be so. It is the frequency of light. It doesn't mean it's reference to light, sunlight. It just is a frequency of light in itself as a source of energy. Okay, and then he also talks about the experience that he had as calling it a type of dismemberment, which is what I said to you. If you have a near-death experience and you have a lot of it, if you were unwell, I also had something like that a long time ago, where there was a continuous near-death experience, in and out, in and out, in and out a lot. It's like your body was having some sort of breaking down of false beliefs and things, which then makes you feel like you're being broken down, but in a sense you're actually being purified. So that is what he talks about here, and he also refers to the other thing here, which I found interesting, that he got from Emanuel Swedenborg, who wrote the book Visionary Tradition, as talking about something called Ghostly Bride, which is a continuing vision from the Swedenborg Foundation. The spirit woman, literally anima, which is the soul, is described by Jung throughout his collected works as a factor especially active in masculine psychology. So the anima and the animus, which is the masculine and the feminine principles within every human being. Okay. Mutwa's visions was very much based on traditional Zulu lore. I do not agree with it entirely, based on the fact that most of the work was also coming from other influencers that were trying to cash in on his gift, to put it like that. Then the word Tokolosh, which is the word for zombie, is here the same strange creature as also likened to the evil golem or a robot. And the deluge is founded in the mythologies from the Middle Eastern, Oriental to the African traditions. There's a path in that. Okay. So that is important if you're wanting to go into much deeper details. Yeah, that would be it. The rest is filled with political chaos. Alright, so now this book, the same thing, sadly, also talks a lot about ancient astronauts, references a lot from the Sophia, Gnosticism, and Kabbalah, where in the contents of the book you'll see, I'll pull it back so you can see the writing there, where he gives the information. He talks about the tree of life, and he basically writes stories around the traditions of the many tribesmen and people that he found on his journey. Every person has a little story to tell, which was wonderfully written. However, it was influenced by a lot of other things in the background, which means the information that he gave, very much similar to another South African psychic called Siener van Rensburg, was very much influenced in the same way, where spirituality is used to or siphoned into a belief system that is locked into the skin of the torus, which is the diamond, same way that people are very spirited and sought out to be used as people that can operate spiritual dynamics or realms. And in this way, we're looking at essentially the Kabbalah as the main focus here, and the Gnosticism, which is a fusion of the two. And here's another, let me just find this page, just to give you a little thought here, where he talks about it. He says, it is said briefly that the Great Spirit has created the universe for reasons that nobody must endeavor to fathom. The Great Spirit used a being called the First Goddess, who worked as a tool under his directions. In answer a request, she was granted as a companion a weird kind of thing, of being, half plant and half animal, the Tree of Life. The Tree of Life, the most reverent deity throughout Bantu Africa, even today. Numerous representative designs engraved on clay pots, etc., etc. Okay. Then we came to a particular period which they refer to as Zahar Rahel, which means this is the period that is said to have been responsible for the infection of all mankind with mental disease like ambition and love for all of the wicked things the most ensure from it, including bloodshed. Now this is reference to the Gnostics' experience when they started to break away from the original belief systems of that time, Christianity, where they were saying that if you become involved in the physical reality, then it is all sinful, and that it is wicked, and you should rather just, jump off a cliff or something like that sort. I'm being dramatic now, but that's basically the essence of it. So it is different than you would normally find. And here's another one. Talks very interestingly about the religion and the beliefs of the Bantu people. I've been a Christian and I once was a Muslim. See, live and let live. Love thy neighbor and see, live and let live. That's basically how he wanted his life to be. So he keeps saying these things, and he keeps bringing in other things that are contradictory, which tells you that this guy was pestered by a lot of influencers that were trying to make him present something else. Even every race, nation, community on earth, no matter how high or how low it stands on the ladder of civilization, cling to a belief, a philosophy, a religion, or a call. It is superstition. But each cling with the tenacity that readily induces thousands and even millions to its subjects to lay down their lives in its defense. It may have been acquired from without, or it may be the embroidery of the race's own prophets and philosophers, and such beliefs constitute mostly those things that the peculiar race or nation regards as its ideals. Its symbols or examples of spiritual and material perfection in days gone by. This belief nearly always took the form of reverence for a god or a number of gods or goddesses who were honored or worshipped in its particular ways. And that is an excellent quote which he wrote, which I've quoted from, and I will leave it there for you to peruse and investigate in your own way, because this then removes yet another card from the House of Cards, and hopefully presents the information in a much more clearer way, so that you are able to be aware that all the wisdom and the knowledge of the connection with Great Spirit is actually within you and not ever outside of you, and never will be outside of you. Unless you want to be the slave of the material realm, then you are focused and fixated within the rooting of a lot of magical thinking. Yeah. And I will leave it there. And thank you so much for your support and all your hundreds of questions. We will talk again. Thank you. And I'll see you soon. Bye.